Alright guys, so now it's time to create a new notebook, a new Colab notebook, so that we can begin to learn about ways in which we can use variables and conditions. So you see here, if you go to colab.research.google.com, you'll be presented with this modal box, and it will show you the existing Colab notebooks on your accounts. So you have, these are my recent ones. They have some examples here, which are very necessary if you're very new to the platform. You have your recent ones here. You have those saved on Google Drive. You can have your GitHub repos here. And you can also upload your Jupyter notebooks or any notebooks, the type of notebook that you have, and you push it here to see it in your list. In this case, we want to create a new notebook. So I'm going to click on New Notebook here on the bottom right section of this box. So you click on New Notebook, and you see here we have a /, and now we have this link /drive/something. So that next time, if I want to access my new notebooks or my existing notebooks, I can go to the Google Drive tab and I will see this notebook here. Now, whenever you create a new Colab notebook, it's very important that you update the title. Otherwise, it will be like entitled 0 and so on. That's not a very informative title. So I'm going to name this tutorial_2. So you can see that we have two different buttons. One is code. So this here is a code cell. Inside of this is where you're going to type your Python code and run it by clicking either on this play button or by pressing Shift and Enter on your keyboard at the same time. You have also here, occasionally as you keep going, it will automatically save your changes. So you don't have to go to File and then hit Save manually. It will do it by itself. We're not going to use any text cell here, so I'm going to delete these cells for now. You see that there is this bin icon. If you hover or you click on a cell, there is a delete icon. So you can click here and delete it. You can also delete a code cell. So if I delete this, now my notebook is completely empty. We're going to go back, hit on this code here. It says plus code. Just click on it. We're back to having a code cell. And now we're going to create variables. I'm not sure if this font is large enough for you guys to see this, so I'm going to make my screen slightly bigger. I apologize if it looks too big, but I just want to cater to all my users. Maybe you're watching this on the phone and you'll find it a little bit too small to read. So creating variables, this here is a comment. So if I come here and I click the play button to run this, there is no outputs. Nothing happened because this is simply a Python comment. And if you know a bit about Python, as you watch this video, you should know that comments are not executed. They simply provide information to the developer. So if you have something important to note for a certain code snippet or a certain piece of data in your code, then you add a comment. Now let's create a variable that I'm going to call x. I could call it x, or let's call it var1. And var1 is going to be equal to 10. So again, now I have this and I'm going to run this cell. Nothing happened, but actually in the background, var1 was created as a variable. So it was declared, and then the value of 10 was assigned to that variable. I'm going to create a second variable because you can create multiple variables in a single code cell. How you organize your code is entirely up to you. So in this case, I'm going to have var2, and var2 is going to be equal to 15. Now again, if I click play, nothing happens. If I want to see the values here, there are different ways I can do that. So the very basic one, not necessarily the most tidy way of doing it, but one of the basic ways of doing that is adding a code cell. So when you click on code, it will add a new code at the bottom. You can also go back and add a code at the top here. So for example, here, if I clicked code at the top of the first one, it's going to add a code cell on top of what was previously my first cell, right? But in this case, I don't need it, so I'm going to click delete. I also need to show you guys that when you run your code cells, you will see numbers like 3, 4, and so on. And as you progress in your notebook, different cells are going to have higher numbers. Anytime you create a new code cell, the value increments by 1. So now let's take a look at these two variables here. I can say var1, and you see that it's already suggesting to me var1 because it knows what that is. That here is a variable. So if I press on this arrow here, it even knows that this is an integer. Now you know that in Python, you don't have to explicitly state or determine the data type of your variables because it's done for you in the background. It's not like C++ where you have to specify, is it a short int, an int, or a long, and so on. In this case, it already knows that it's an int, and when I click on the arrow, it shows me int with the value x as a sample parameter, and it gives you some extra information of how integers work here. So in this case, let me run this code cell, and now I have this output here that says 10 because the value of var1 is 10. So whenever you click on play, that play button, or you press shift enter on a code cell, it's going to give you any output that is available. If there is an output, it's going to display it. If there isn't, like in this case, we were simply initializing variables, that is not going to show anything. All right, now, when you see the output here, there is some sort of arrow, like a rectangle and an arrow. If you hover on this, then it has a cross that says clear outputs. And if I click on this, now the output disappears. So this is important if you have a bunch of debugging code and you don't want all of that to be showing in your notebook because it's actually saving everything for you. So if you want to clean something up, just run a code cell, make sure that your code runs as expected, and then you can clear the outputs. In this case, I'm going to leave the output here, and I'm going to show you how you can display multiple values in the outputs via a single code cell. You can simply have comma var2, and now when I run this, I have 10 and then 15 because var1 was 10, var2 was 15. Now let's create a new variable. We're going to call it var3, like our third variable. And by the way, notice that here, this is now number 8 because it is like the 8th time that you're running the code. Now this cell is number 9. So anytime you run something, the number is going to increase over and over again. All right, so now var3 is going to be the addition, the result of the addition, or the sum of var1 and var2. So that's how I want to initialize my variable. All right, so now let's run this. Same thing as before. We created a variable, declared it, and then initialized it. There was no output because we did not call that variable, but they still work because the values of var1 and var2 are actually stored and available in the runtime. We're going to talk more about runtime in future videos, but I want to show you guys that when you initialize, you don't need to go to a new code cell to output the value of your variable. You can even do it on the same line like this. You don't even need to do print var3. I'm just going to show you guys. If you want, you can do print var3 just like this. And now it's giving you 25. That is the result of that print statement because 10 plus 15 is 25. But even if you don't use the print function to have the conventional print statements in Python, you can simply have the name of the variable like this, and it's going to display it. So this doesn't only work in code cells in which you're initializing your variables. You can also have them on their own. So here we have var1, var2. I can choose to output it here one more time. So if I have var1 like this, it's still 10 because I never updated the value of var1. So wherever I call this variable, I'm going to get the value 10 all the time. So it's not just basic evaluation that you can do. You can also, actually it's also evaluation, but you can also have conditions as part of your code here. So let's try to check if x or I called it var1. So let's check if var1 is less than var2. Now we're supposed to get true because 10 is less than 15. So let's check this out here to prove that we can run conditions in code cells. So now I'm running this and I see true because var1 is less than var2. If I have the opposite operator like this, is var1 greater than var2, then I would get false. And now it's saying false. Let's say you want to use a different operator now. You want to update the value of a variable. The good thing in Colab is that everything can be displayed sequentially. So here I had 10 and 15, and then I displayed here 10 and 15. But I can now update the value of var1, and I'm still going to have 10 and 15 here, but on the new outputs, I'm going to get the new value. So for example, let's say var1, I'm using the assignment operator here, meaning that I'm going to multiply var1 by 50 and then store the result back into var1. So essentially, I'm going to update the value here. Now let's also log the value in the outputs. And now it says 500 because var1 was initially 10. Now that we've multiplied it by 50, it is now 500. But we have a history of the updates for these variables because the outputs are static. They're not dynamic in the sense that they're not going to automatically update themselves if you change the value or you update your data inside of your notebook. The values are going to show based on what is available in the runtime at any given time. So that's how you can update values. However, you need to be careful that you don't run code cells multiple times because otherwise the values are going to get updated. Remember that now, as of now, var1 has the value 500 in the runtime. So if I run this again, this cell, it's not going to do 10 times 50 again. It's going to do 500, which is the current value of var1, times 50. So I believe this should give me 25,000. Let me run this code cell again. And now I have 25,000. So you need to be careful when you are working with variables because if at some point you mistakenly run a code cell twice or maybe 3 times and then you use that variable somewhere else, you're going to get a weird value. Like if I come here and I do var1 plus var2, then now I'm going to get the value 25,015, which is not what I might be expecting. Maybe I wanted to get 515, not 25,015. So you need to keep that in mind. Now let's see how you can have multiple comparisons at the same time. So you don't even need parentheses or anything. If you want, you can. So I'm going to add parentheses like this, and I'm going to verify is var1 less than var2, comma, is var1 equal to var2 like this, comma, is var1 greater than var2. And I'm also going to verify if it's not the same as var2. So is var1 like this? I think, let me check if this makes sense. So var1 is less than var2, var1 is equal to var2, var1 is greater than var2, and this checks if they're not the same value. So let's run this code cell, and we get all our conditions evaluated, and all the results are combined together inside of this result here. So we have false, false, which is correct, and then we have true and true, which is also correct. So we could dive deeper into variables and so on, but I hope this gives you an idea of how it works. Now, to prove again that the runtime is updated in real time, let's come here and log the values again of var1 and var2 without running any other code cell other than this one here. So I'm coming here and then I'm clicking the play button, and you see that var1 now says 25,000. Although this code cell is above this one here when this command was executed, it's above, but it's only returning what is available in the runtime. So it doesn't matter where you run your code cells. What matters is the sequence in which you created and updated your values. So you need to be careful about that, otherwise it's going to mess up your entire computation, especially if your activity is heavily based on mathematics and so on. So this is what you need to keep in mind. The order in which you run your code cells matters a lot. Alright, so that's it for this video. In the next one, we're going to look at arrays and perhaps looping through collections.